All right, welcome back to the Flow State Podcast. I am your host, Marshall Medallion, and today we have a very special guest, a friend, a mentor, and a franchise owner of McDonald's. Welcome to the podcast, Melvin Pickard.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Marshall. I appreciate it.
Yes. So before we get started, I wanted to tell the podcast a little story. So I grew up in the Kenwood Deer Park area when I first moved to Ohio when I was 14. And as I got to know the area, I would see this office building, and I'm like, it had a McDonald's logo on it. Yeah. And I was like, what is McDonald's doing in this neighborhood? It's just an office building, but what do they have going on? So later on, as I started to cut hair in the area, I met you through cutting your sons, and I found out that you're behind Pickard Enterprises.
Absolutely.
And so before we talk business, though, I'd like to get to know you and kind of understand how you got here to where you're at with business and stuff. But what was life like growing up?
Man, life was good growing up. I have to say, born in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
So that's where I spent the first 9 to 10 years of my life. So born in Detroit, obviously Detroit at the time was, kind of having its heyday.
Right.
Motown, Motor City, city was booming, right?
Yeah.
So life was good. Everybody was able to make a good living. My family, we weren't well off by any means, but we were getting by. We were very comfortable. Anything we needed or we wanted, my mom was able to provide it for us,
Okay.
So that was a beautiful thing. So I love Detroit. All my family's still there to this day.
Okay.
I try to go back maybe once a year, not so often now that my mother's no longer there, but I still try to go back to keep that connection to my family, especially for the kids, right? Mm-hmm. So life was good there in Detroit. So when I was about 10 years old, my father, who has been an operator for 40 plus years with McDonald's, he got his first opportunity to purchase some restaurants. And so he moved to St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
So around that time, my father and my mother weren't necessarily together at the time. So to kind of give me more opportunity because, there were some things that were tough in Detroit, right?
For sure.
That was back when, they had these jackets called Pelly Pellies or the starter jackets.
Yeah.
As a young kid, you'd be walking to school and kids were jacking people for their coats, for their sneakers, right? And I have a lot of family, man, that just didn't make it to be, my age, make it past 20. Mm-hmm. So to get me out of that environment, my mom and my father decided to let me move to Hemworth, Missouri. I was about 10 years old. Mm-hmm. So left total inner city environment, went to a completely other end of the spectrum to Chesterfield, Missouri, which is 100% suburbs, right?
Yeah.
So for me as a kid coming from Detroit, it was eye-opening, right? Tons of land, great schools, things went from just being able to get what we need to definitely doing a lot of what we want to be able to do. So I moved to Missouri when I was 10 years old, grew up there, elementary school, finished elementary school, high school, graduated from high school in Missouri. But life in Missouri, man, when I tell you it was good, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is the 80s, right? Mm-hmm. So were there some challenges? I was probably the only African-American, probably one of 4 or 5 African-American kids that lived in what they called the county, so that brought some unique challenges. Yeah. Anytime I got in trouble, they're like, oh, you're the kid whose dad owns McDonald's, right? So I could never hide anything I did because everyone knew who I was, knew who my family was, but that's not a problem because I wasn't a bad kid. I was a good kid. So that was life in Missouri was great, man. So when I graduated from high school in I won't say what year I graduated from high school. I won't say that. I don't want to give that away. But no, so when I graduated from high school, I went to college in Atlanta, Georgia, Morehouse College. So that was another really huge eye-opening experience for me. And let me tell you why. Leaving Detroit at such a young age, and then moving into a completely different environment, a suburban environment. Mm-hmm. Being a young African-American kid, sometimes, I feel like you need tons of role models and people to kind of any, I don't want to just say African-American, but any minority, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to be connected to your culture.
Definitely.
Understand where you came from, understand the challenges, that people have experienced to be able to be successful. And so,
Correct.
One of the things that me and my parents talked about was, well, I got a scholarship to play tennis at Pepperdine and in Malibu, California. And believe me, that's where I wanted to go.
Right.
But my father and I, we made a deal. He said, spend 2 years at Morehouse. 2 years at Morehouse. If you don't like it, you know what? You can go wherever you want to go. So I was like, I don't know. But I did it. And probably one of the best experiences I ever made. Mainly because what I was saying before, as a young kid growing up in the suburbs, I truly didn't understand the struggle or appreciate. I understood it because I'm in history class. I understand, the history of our country and some of the things we've experienced, but truly didn't understand, the impact that would have on me and others like me to be able to be successful going forward in my life, right? And so leaving Missouri, going to Atlanta, and being in an environment where, when I say all types, people of all races coming on, there's no homogeny, right? All white folks are different, all people, every black folks are different. And what that allowed me to see, because when I grew up in Missouri, and just to kind of give you a little bit about me, I was skateboarding, great skateboarder, was sponsored by a local skate shop out there.
Wow.
Snowboarded, listening to punk rock music, a lot of things. As a traditional African-American family, my parents were like, they'd look at me like, what's wrong with Melvin? He's wearing Vision streetwear.
Yeah.
He's got holes in his sneakers. He's always riding that skateboard. What's going on? And so I say all that to say, even ran away to follow the Grateful Dead for a few weeks of my life.
Right.
Blowing my parents' mind. Like, what? Is he going to be okay is what they thought.
Right.
Is Melvin going to be okay? That's just part of me growing up, right? But being able to go to Morehouse, I felt like when I left Chesterfield and went to Morehouse, I feel like there's no other kids out there like me, right? I was like, oh, I'm just having this truly unique experience of being this hippie, skateboarding, minority kid that nobody understands.
Right.
And then to be able to go to an environment where I've got tons of other kids that look just like me, and the vast differences in everyone. I found my people immediately, right? I was like, oh, where'd you grow up? DC. I skateboarded, or I did, so it just kind of opened my eyes to say,
right,
my experience wasn't that unique, right? I just hadn't met anybody else like me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful thing, man, to be able to go to Morehouse and say, oh, I thought it was going to be, excuse my ignorance, right? Sometimes you say, oh, is it going to be militant, or they don't want to be around people of other cultures? No, not at all, right?
Right.
It's an empowerment thing. It was about empowering, learning your history, having teachers that look like you that can truly express to you, hey, these are some of the challenges that we face to be successful in our professional careers or as professors. Here's what you guys should expect, so that when you get out into the real world, because the real world's not going to be Morehouse, right? You're not going to work at a company that's 100% minority.
Right.
Probably not going to get hired by someone that looks like you. Probably won't get fired by someone that looks like you. So here's how you navigate the world, right? When you get into the world, the cutthroat world that we live in today.
Correct.
Here's some skills and some tools for you to be successful in life. I'm not sure how much you know about Morehouse, but great lineage.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, W.E. Du Bois, Spike Lee. A huge lineage of African-American, successful African-Americans matriculated to that university. And so with that history comes a lot of weight, right? And so as I spent my first 2 years there, going back to my dad saying spend 2 years, I was having such a great experience, not only getting to know my fellow brothers, but also getting to know myself. And I think that was probably the most powerful thing about being at Morehouse, getting to know about myself and growing as an individual, not just as a man, but as an African-American man, as a man of substance, a man of excellence, right? Because that's what Morehouse talks about.
Yes.
Hey, being excellent. Because, a lot of what I feel like a lot of minorities are taught, and I think a reality that we live sometimes is you have to be, or we're taught that we have to be 5 to 10 times better than our counterparts to attain the same success, right?
Okay.
And so I think going to an institution like Morehouse where excellence was pushed, excellence was expected, right, really kind of helped me level up in so many ways about how I
Right.
conducted myself, about how I studied, about how I prepared for life, about how I was going to face challenges, right? Because if the people who walked through these halls of Morehouse before I did could do it, then, certainly I think I can do it too.
For sure.
So.
For sure.
So that takes me to Morehouse, graduated from college, Morehouse, stayed in Atlanta. I did a lot of different work before I ended up with McDonald's, right? I thought that was important for me. Well, yeah, I thought it was important because I, graduated college. I could have gone to the business with my father, but I really didn't have any skills, what I call tools, right? I mean, I was young. I had a lot of energy. I didn't have a lot of business experience or a lot of life experience.
Right.
You know what I mean? So what am I coming to the business to bring other than just youthful exuberance? I felt like not a lot. So I decided not to go into the business at that time. What I decided to do was, hey, I'm going to work. I'm going to get some experience. I'm going to travel. So graduated Morehouse. The first thing I did is I got a job at Bank of America working as a, what do they call them back then? Like a
Personal banker or
Yeah, like a
teller?
personal banker.
Yeah.
Exactly, a personal banker. So you walk in, there's a guy at the desk. You got to open an account. You go sit down with that guy.
Yeah.
That was what I did, right? It wasn't my end goal, but it was like, let me learn a little. I always knew I wanted to be in business, and so when I was at Morehouse, I studied business information systems. So I was a finance major, computer science minor, and economics. Because at the time they didn't have computer information systems where you could kind of bring all that kind of stuff together, right? But I knew even in the time I was in college that technology and business were going to at some point become a very powerful partner. And so I said, how can I kind of learn while I'm in school to take a little bit of this economics, finance, and computers and bring them together? So that was what I studied. And so went to Bank of America, worked as a personal banker, but then I was like, you know what? I'll be working you start to realize real quick when you get out of college, my buddies would call me, hey Mel, what are you doing for spring break? And I was like, I'll be working.
Yeah.
Hey Mel, where are you going for Memorial Weekend? Be working.
Yeah.
And then it started hitting me like that first year out of college, like, oh, wait a second. This is what my parents talked about. Enjoy your time in college, your time as a young man when you don't have responsibilities, because when you get out of school, guess what you're going to be doing? Working, right? And the grind doesn't stop.
It doesn't.
It doesn't stop. And so I worked Bank of America, then I decided to spend 3 weeks to a month, and I just went to Europe. So I saved up some money, went to Europe with a buddy of mine, a good friend of mine, and traveled Europe, man. I was like, I want to see the world. Here again, my parents, my dad sat up and says, Melvin, why do you want to go to Europe? What do you want to do what's over there? Why would you want to go over there? I said, Dad, I just want to see the world. Like, what does the world have to offer? Different cultures, right?
Yes.
Different experiences. I mean,
Yes.
I think as a young man that's, 21, 22 years old, I feel like that's going to give me a different perspective
Correct.
on life.
Yes.
One that I don't have any kids. I don't have any real responsibilities, right? So I said, I just want to experience the world a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he was just like, you're not working? What's wrong with you?
Right.
I was like, Dad, times are changed. And so I just wanted that experience, Marshall. You know what I mean? I just wanted to see the world, see cultures. And that's what I did for a month. I traveled around Europe, met some great people, had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Right? But the main thing I learned is like, we all kind of live the same life in a lot of ways. We just experience it in different places, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I did that. Came back, decided maybe it was time to lock in on life.
Yeah.
But came back with I was so invigorated because I said, I would love to do that more as I get older, right? I would love to be able to have a family and take my family to do that. So I think it also put that fire into me, going back to what I was saying about Morehouse, to make sure that I'm successful. So that I can continue to have these kind of experiences for myself, for my family, with my family.
Correct.
My mother, while she was still alive, my brothers, So that was very motivating. Came back, kind of locked in on work, came back to the bank, personal banker, best personal banker you ever met. Opening up accounts, I was crushing it. Opening credit cards, I was doing all that, but I knew my vision kind of got bigger after I came back. I was like, what do I really want to do now that I'm back and I've seen a little bit of the world? And so, being a huge company like Bank of America, they had tons of, different jobs you can do. Ended up getting a job in their consumer real estate division in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah. So moved from Atlanta to Charlotte, North Carolina, in their consumer real estate department. Consumer real estate department. So what they did there, they were originating home loans. That's what they did, right? Managed properties. But Bank of America, what they did in the mid 90s, early 2000s, was they created something called mortgage servicing rights.
Okay.
Never been created before. So they learned how to separate, or what they called bifurcating, the mortgage servicing right from the loan itself. And so the servicing right was, every month you make a payment on your mortgage. That's like a revenue stream, right? So they would separate that part of the loan from the actual home itself.
Wow.
And so they were selling those, and it became like a whole market, mortgage servicing rights market.
Right.
So I was at the front end of that whole thing. It was super exciting, super cool. I loved it, right? I mean, it kind of started to marry my business from Morehouse, my business experience, with, a little bit of economics. And then a lot of what I was doing also was like modeling. And so it kind of brought in that financial, or that computer piece about how do we take a whole bunch of data sets about interest rates, about home values, about different tranches of loans, and model that to say, how successful or unsuccessful will these different tranches of loans be?
Right.
So I was able to kind of take all that and marry it, and it was awesome. I mean, just being at the front end of something that's so new, right?
Yes.
Everyone's super excited about it.
Yes.
I mean, the whole market overall was like, oh, this is great, right? We can originate loans, millions and millions of loans, and then have these revenue streams generated, or package them and sell them and make tons of money. And they did, and they were making a lot of money, right? Ken Lewis at the time, the CFO, big money. It was great. So I did that for probably 3 to 5 years. And here again, I still had that travel bug in me. I still wanted to experience different things. So I left Atlanta, was in Charlotte at this time, and I said, you know what? I thought what I wanted to do was, like, the pinnacle was, I want to work for a Big Four accounting firm. Because, that was kind of, you come out of school, you're like, I'm going to work for PwC or, KPMG or Pricewater. You just want to work for one of these big companies.
Right.
So I applied to work with KPMG out in their structured finance group. Matter of fact, I didn't even apply. This is the crazy thing about this. Because of what Bank of America did and the group that we had, I actually got a call one day, from this guy, John Panion. He worked for KPMG, and said, hey, we got a structured finance group out in LA. I understand you work with Bank of America and you do some of their mortgage servicing and stuff. I was like, yeah, why? He's like, we'd love for you to come out and work in our structured finance group out here in LA and go look at, different companies. Because, when I say mortgage servicing rights were huge, we all know what happened with the end of this story, right? But at the time, everybody was trying to get in the game. And what they needed to know was, are these assets on our book worth what we say they're worth?
Right.
And so that's what we did in the structured finance group out in LA with KPMG. I would travel to different banks, different small, big, mid-size, whatever the case may be, and we would do what we called, we would kind of reverse engineer their portfolio. What you should be able to do when these companies say that my asset, we can say it's a car, whatever it is, right? It's a widget, whatever it is. If I'm saying it's worth $1,000, I should be able to go out on just any readily available site and get some data points and say, let me model this, put it into a spreadsheet, let's run a model, and come up close to, if you're saying it's worth 1,000, I should be able to take these different market inputs, reverse engineer it, and come up with that same value.
Exactly.
If I can, what you're saying is true.
Right.
If I can't,
you're lying.
now we're like, okay, something's not right here, right?
Right.
And so we're a consulting company. So they didn't have to take what we said as truth. We're just giving them a statement of, say, we believe your portfolio is or is not worth what you're saying it's worth, and here's why.
A verified source.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got
Now, they can take it and say, oh, okay, we're going to do something different.
Right.
They can take it and say, thank you, sir. Put that to the side. But it's something they had to do regulatory-wise to make sure that they had independent auditors looking at their portfolios.
Correct.
Now, did they want to hear what we had to say sometimes? Nope, not at all. Because, you have companies at the time that were generating, I'm not going to try to over-exaggerate, I'll just under-exaggerate and say hundreds of millions of dollars in loans. And you had CFOs, CEOs being compensated on the origination of loans. And so there's two different things, right? You can originate a loan, which is, hey, I got Marshall a home. I've originated that loan. And now, or you can, and then you also have the piece where are the loans, what's the value of that loan? So meaning, does Marshall have high credit, low credit? What are the odds of him defaulting on that?
Right.
That piece at that time didn't matter. The piece that mattered the most is how much are you originating? Because I'm getting paid off the originations. Once I sell it off, I don't care what happens.
Right.
Right? And so there was a misalignment of priorities there. You know, because if I'm the banker, my thing is originating loans. I don't care if they're good, bad, or what. Originate them. I'm getting paid on that. Once I sell them off, I don't care. And so what ended up happening, as you know, most of us know this now, is there's a lot of bad loans out there. A lot of bad loans. And so we started seeing this at KPMG. We started seeing, as we're doing our analysis, that what you're saying your portfolio is worth and what we're calculating your portfolio is worth, there's a huge misalignment. And just to illustrate just how serious this was, we had a gentleman that worked with us, super smart guy, forensic accountant, very good with the numbers. We walked into a major financial institution, looked at their portfolio, and Tom walked into the room and he tells this CFO that you're saying that your loans are worth, let's just say $1 billion, it's worth a quarter of that. This man got up, asked my boss, John Payne, to leave the room. John came back in, told Tom to leave. You know why? He didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to hear someone telling him in a meeting that what he's getting paid on isn't worth what he's saying it's worth. John kicked that gentleman out of the room. 3 days later, he was let go. 6 months later, that bank went under.
Wow.
That bank went under. And so, as that started to happen, a lot of what I talked about before with these bad loans, no income verification, no asset verification, no appraisals, none of that stuff. So you've got a person with a loan, they're paying whatever they're paying, and they can't afford to pay it. These things started to crumble, which caused the big market collapse in 2009. And around that time, I had a decision to make for myself, right? That work dried up. That market wasn't coming back. So what do I do at that point with my life? And throughout the time, me and my father always talked, right? I mean, it's my father, so we always talked, but we always talked about me coming into the business, right? So I was like, no, Dad, I'm enjoying what I'm doing at Bank of America. I'm loving life. Go to LA. How about the business now? Dad, I'm loving this. I mean, because KPMG was great in a lot of ways. You got what you think of the corporate card. I'm traveling all the time, making good money. I'm living in LA. I got the beach here. I've got the mountains there. I loved it, right? I couldn't complain. But once that happened, I had to decide, one, do I want to stay with KPMG and do like audit work, which was not my thing? Or, and one thing, I'm not afraid to work. Because when you're working for a firm like that, you're working 70, 80 hours a week. There'd be times where I would come back in town from traveling. Wouldn't even unpack my suitcase yet. My boss would call and say, hey, have you unpacked it? I'm like, no, why? What's going on? Oh, we need you to leave tomorrow at such and such time to go here. So it was like, oh, wow, okay, I don't have a lot of control over my life. But when this happened, my dad and I talked again. I was like, Dad, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. The market's changed. Where am I going to go? So at that point, to kind of bring us to close to where we are today, we talked and I said, you know what, maybe now's the time for me to explore the business with you. And so that was 2008, 2009, when I decided, you know what, maybe I'll make a shift and I'll come into the family business. So. Yeah.
Okay. So I did a little bit of research, and so your dad was an owner-operator, correct?
Yes.
Now, does that help you in getting in as a franchisee, or do you still have to go through the same steps as those that didn't have somebody connected?
Like a parental?
Yeah.
like a parent in the business? Yeah, it does. It does. The process is similar for second gens in a way versus what they call a registered applicant, which means somebody who's just coming in off the streets and saying, I want to be a McDonald's owner operator. With him being an operator, it did allow me to go into what they call their second generation program.
Okay.
And what that allows me to do as a kid of a McDonald's operator is versus me having to have the unencumbered cash, which over time has grown. It used to be 250,000, what used to be 500,000. Now it's I think maybe 750,000 unencumbered liquid cash. Instead of me having that burden, since my dad has an organization, he gives me on paper, or what they do is they give their kids on paper a percentage of their organization, say 25%. So that kind of becomes your skin in the game, right?
Right.
And so then I had to go through the NextGen program, which is kind of a structured process from how do you come into the system to how do you become an approved operator.
Okay. Cool. So was your like training through him, or did they were like, okay, now you're in the game, you know, he put, you know, he vouched for you, let's say that.
Right, yeah. Fair.
And is that where you guys kind of went your separate ways and then you guys came back together, or were you working with him and that was your training, like kind of?
Yeah, good question. So there's two ways to do this, right? So typically when I came back into the system, now I'd worked at McDonald's, you know, growing up as a little kid, like I got ketchup in my veins. I mean, that was my first job. You know, I tried to get other jobs that always end back up at McDonald's, right? So the way my training took place this time, I think a lot of times you will train with your parents' organization, right? But what my dad did when I first came in, you know, because I had to learn from being a crew person to being a general manager first. That's anybody who's a McDonald's operator has had to go through that process. You just can't. That. Yeah, you gotta. I mean, because if you're gonna own a McDonald's, you gotta know how to run it.
Right.
You have to know all the intricacies of doing that. So they expect that of you. So, but what my dad did, to your question, was there's McDonald's operators and there's McDonald's Corporation. Both own McDonald's, right? The corporation owns some restaurants. Operators and franchisees like myself own restaurants. What my dad decided to do so I could learn systems and routines from a corporate perspective, he said, hey, he paid me, but I trained with corporate McDonald's for a year. So from the time I was a crew person to the time I graduated Hamburger University, I worked for the corporation. And that's where I did all my training. I didn't work in my dad's restaurants. I wasn't involved in his organization. And it was purely to see from a biased standpoint. Mm-hmm. Here's how you should run a restaurant. Here are some of the routines you should have to be successful. Here are some of the processes that you should implement in your restaurant to control your cost, to improve profit, without having the burden of my parents, you know, kind of overseeing. I don't want to say burden, but I think it was his way of saying, here's a unbiased way of looking at the business. So when you come back to me, you've got some skills and understanding from a corporate perspective, how they expect us to run McDonald's, right? So that's kind of how that training went down.
Okay, I hear this said quite often that McDonald's is not in the hamburger business, they're in the real estate business. Why do people say that?
Well, because it's true in a lot of ways, but here's why they say it. So every McDonald's that you've ever seen, I mean, nowadays, I mean, there was a time when operators could own the land that the restaurant's on, but now McDonald's owns every piece of land that a McDonald's restaurant is sitting on.
Okay.
So you can't find a site and say, I want to be here, or here's a site, pay me for the site. They find it, they own it. You pay them for that site for the 20 years of your lease that you have. Well, you pay them, let me just say this, in perpetuity for as long as you own a restaurant. So therefore, you know, they are probably the biggest real estate holding company in the US because of that particular structure they have as franchisors.
Okay. How do you balance working in the business and working on the business? At this point, are you solo, only working on the business, or do you still try to put yourself in the day-to-day. Just walk us through, like, what does a work week look like for you?
I mean, work weeks vary, but there's, they call us owner-operators for a reason, right? They expect you to... Operator.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right? It's not a hands-off thing. It's not I've got someone to run the restaurants for me. So a typical week for me will be split, let's say 60-40, restaurants, office.
Really?
Yes.
60% restaurants, 40% office?
60% restaurants, 40% office.
Wow.
Now, that's evolving a little bit because for a while, my father and I were operating restaurants together. So when he was still really active in the business, he would take care of some of the stuff, I don't want to say less desirable, the things that weren't restaurant focused, right? Maybe managing the office, looking at insurance, right? Looking at payrolls things, looking at how does he cut costs or how does he cut overhead? He worried about that. My thing was I'm going to be in the restaurants improving operations to grow sales, guest counts, and profit. So let's say, depending on whose sales are good, just depending on what the numbers, the key KPIs, key performance indicators are saying, I'll spend several hours in the restaurants just doing customer facing. Just like you as a customer, you go through the drive-thru, you order something to eat. Are they friendly? They give you the right order, right? Did they greet you promptly at the speaker? So I will shop my restaurants from a customer perspective to see if those things are being executed. I'll go in, provide coaching. I'm going in to look at food safety. I'm going in to talk to my managers, my crew, doing a gut check. How's everything going? What do you need? Is there anything that we could do better to help support you at the restaurant, from my GMs, my shift managers, and my crew? When I'm not doing that, I am spending more time, as I said, things are shifting. I am finding myself having to spend more time in the office because my father's presence isn't there as much. And so there are still things that aren't restaurant related that I have to kind of tend to now. So it does require me to go to the office a little bit more, because probably if you'd asked me this question a few years ago, it'd probably be more like 80-20.
Really?
Yeah, 80% of the time in the restaurants. There was a time where it's 100%, right? But as my role as an operator grows, I think I'm having to shift, kind of how I spend my time to make sure, I'm overseeing both parts of the business.
Yeah, opportunity
the running
cost.
it and the managing it piece. But in order to do that, you got to have good people.
Segue impeccable. So the next point that I wanted to make is one thing I really respect about you is you are a great communicator. You're very patient and you listen to comprehend, not just respond. And how much of your job is managing people and communicating effectively?
Marshall, McDonald's, is a people business.
It is.
It's a people business. Yeah, we're selling burgers and fries, but it's a people business. And my dad would say that to me all the time before I came into the business. I truly didn't understand it until I got into the business, because this is different than a lot of other things. Like I kind of talked about KPMG. I wasn't dealing with individuals on directly dealing with individuals. I was in a cubicle, we're doing reports, and we're presenting them to a board or a room full of folks.
Right.
Totally different than what we have to do at McDonald's. Totally different. I spend all my time just in what you just said, connecting with my people, right? Trying to figure out what they need, supporting them, right? Because without them, my restaurants don't run.
Right.
They don't run. So it truly is a people business. And I think a lot of times they say, people quit people, not jobs, right?
Wow.
So the connection I do or don't make with the people that work for me could be, a huge plus, or it could be a huge minus, right? And so I think me as an operator, it's very important that I connect with my folks. I'm genuine, because, people understand when you're being fake.
For sure.
And you truly care about them versus you're just trying to get them to do things and you don't care about who they are as people. Sometimes I'm a counselor. Sometimes I'm a loan. I'm giving loans. Sometimes I'm just a coach, right? Because the kids, a lot of times, sometimes, not all, but sometimes they don't get that kind of tutelage, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I am playing that role.
Yes.
I'm not replacing anybody in their life.
No, I understand.
Right, but for those 8 or 10 hours that we spend together in the restaurants, I'm kind of a coach for them. And so, yeah, I spend a lot of my time, or so much of my time, trying to find people that want to work in the restaurants, find people and reward people who are doing the right things in the restaurants, not only when I'm looking, right, but when I'm not there. Like, who's doing the right things, who's treating my customers right, and how can I reward or recognize? It's always not about money. Sometimes it's about just telling somebody, great job.
Yes.
Hey, I see you today. The way you did X, Y, and Z was phenomenal. I appreciate that.
Wow.
There was a time when, coming from KPMG, a more pressurized environment where I only saw negative when I walked in the restaurant, right? Mr. Melvin, all you ever tell us is what we don't do right. What about what we do right? And I had to stop myself after hearing that so many times and have to reflect and say, wow, that's kind of powerful, right?
It is.
There's so many little things that people do right, but I'm only focused on whatever my focus is, right?
Correct.
And what they want to hear, if they want to work, is what am I doing right? I know I'm not perfect, but tell me what I'm doing right as well. So 90% of my time when I'm not in the restaurants and not doing something, I'm looking for people. I'm looking for people because it's so important. And I'm blessed to have good people around me, including my father first. I found a great director in Rodney who works for me now, has been working for me now for a couple years. It's phenomenal. We share the same values. We look at the business the same, the way we treat people and want to recognize people. And even for me, the people piece, I haven't stopped growing at that.
Yes.
Right? I learned from Rodney about, my director about, hey, here's what we can do for our people, right? And you got to never stop learning and be able to take input from other people around you, right?
Yes.
When you hire great people, let them do their thing.
Yes.
Right?
Delegation.
Delegate.
Yeah.
And be okay with them doing things different than Mr. Marshall or Mr. Melvin would do it, right?
For sure.
It's about the end destination. Sure, maybe I would go this way and that way and that way to get there, but if you're gonna go a different direction, as long as we get there and we're not hurting anybody, that's the key thing, because people who are smart, and knowledgeable, and you bring them in, they don't need you to micromanage them, right? Just need you as an owner or as a CEO or as a leader to give them a vision of where you want to be and let them kind of help you fill in the tactics of how to get there.
Yeah, trust their strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a tough thing to do sometimes.
Yeah. How do you manage the bandwidth to be able to provide this for so many people that are, for lack of better terms, kind of like taking it from you, like draining you of what you have to offer? And I know you don't view it like that because it's your business. Right. But at the same time, what do you do outside of the business to make sure you're emotionally capable or mentally capable to be able to provide that for others? Like what are some of the like behind the scenes, whether hobbies or relationships, or kind of give us what that looks like?
I wish I could say there was something special, but I just family.
Family?
Yeah,
you seem grateful. I think that's one thing that if I could say about you seem very grateful for what you have and you maximize it. So maybe it's just a lifestyle.
It is. Something growing up, my father, my mother, they didn't come from means, right? My dad started as a teacher. He started as a grave digger when he graduated school, was digging graves for a funeral home. Then he went from that to being a teacher for several years. And then he went from that to getting the opportunity to work at McDonald's, right? And a life-changing opportunity for him. So when you say grateful, that's exactly right. I saw firsthand the struggle of my father and my mother to get to where they are today, and I just don't take it for granted, right? I don't. It's such a blessing to be able to be a McDonald's owner-operator, to be able to set my own schedule, to have control over my destiny in so many ways.
For sure.
That I don't take it lightly. So yeah, when I'm not working, spending time with my family, my kids, who I do it for. That's what I do all this for.
I relate. I relate.
That's who I do it all for. Hopefully, I can give them the same opportunity that my father gave me to be able to come into a brand like McDonald's, own restaurants, and provide a good living for them and for myself, and hopefully for their kids as they get older, right? And so yeah, that's how I recharge. I ride my bicycle too. I mean, I do things. I mean, I try to go to the gym and kind of keep the mind right. I read, keep the body. Church, keep the spirit.
Yes.
I mean, you got to stay grounded. So those are the simple things that I do. I'm not a guy. There's not a lot that I want for that I feel like I need to do, but I love my family, my wife, my boys. I'd do anything for them. So just being away from work and spending time with them, seeing them grow. Matter of fact, Nicholas, who you know very well, he just turned 11 today. And so for me, that's just like a huge joy. I woke up early, we had his birthday, so that's what I live for, man. That's truly what I live for. And so that's what recharges me. That's what motivates me. That's what keeps me humble. That's what keeps me grounded, the family. And I know very much like yourself.
Yes, no, I love that. And I really respect that you were intentional about pushing the boundaries of exposure that you had in your life, like all these different segments. You grew up in Detroit, you moved to Missouri, you went to Morehouse, you went through Europe, you went to Charlotte, you went to LA, you went to all these different things, and it's been very helpful for me and to a lot of the people I've been talking to lately to realize that you're limited to your exposure. Exposure is like faith. It's like the foundation of like, okay, I have a reference that I can be because I've seen.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's only up here.
Yep.
But for you, it seems like you were intentional about seeing, feeling, experiencing these different things. And now I relate as a father, being able to provide that for our children. That the more, like, even if you don't like, this, sport or this club, at least you can say you tried and you experienced it. And you can say that I didn't like it because I experienced it. But it's giving them the opportunity to do that. And I also think it's a blessing to be able to do that before they leave the house, because unfortunately not everybody has those means. And a lot of people don't know what they're capable of because they've never sampled different things.
That's exactly right.
So it's definitely a blessing. Let's get back to the business. How, if you don't mind talking about it, how did you go from, like, kind of tell the actual story? I had Frank on last interview, and he was kind of walking us through going from one franchise to multiple franchises, but tell the story. Like, where did it start? How'd you pick up the other ones? I think you had said that you built one brand new.
Yep.
So yeah, kind of tell that story.
So yeah, I kind of alluded to earlier how I went to the NextGen program.
Yes.
And so as you graduate from the NextGen program, you become an approved operator.
Okay.
That's what allows you to buy restaurants.
Okay.
McDonald's has to approve you. And so with me being a second gen, the beauty of that is initially is that, my father, who has restaurants, sells me restaurants, right?
Okay.
So I'm not out there fighting with other operators. I'm not having to, ask McDonald's for restaurants. My father sells me restaurants. And so once I got approved, now, just to kind of go back a second, just because I was approved doesn't mean I get to buy my first restaurant right away, right?
Okay.
There is still a process for that. So, just like any other business, it's my father, but he ain't gonna give me nothing, right? So we had to negotiate on price, negotiate on when we're gonna purchase a restaurant. So about 2 years after being approved, we cut our first deal to buy a restaurant, my first restaurant from him. And so for me, that was about just kind of, as you kind of go up at McDonald's, there's different like learnings, right? When you start and you're a general manager, it's very hands-on, right? Because I'm in the restaurant every day. I'm seeing the people, I'm seeing the drive-through. Then I had to supervise for a little bit, right? So now I'm one step removed from being in the restaurant every day. I'm going to multiple units. But as an operator, I had to learn, truly had to hone my leadership skills, because now I'm not a general manager, I'm not a supervisor, I'm the owner, right? So how do I get my people to buy into my vision and my goals for the restaurant, right? How do I motivate them? How do I teach them? You know, what do I expose them to so that they can help me meet the overall vision of making this first restaurant successful?
Right.
And then from there, you have some learnings, right? You have some opportunities, you have some successes. But then from there, my father and I did what we call the succession plan, about here's when he wants to retire, here's when I want to grow. And so we kind of mapped out from 1 restaurant to 6 restaurants how we were going to kind of transfer those over from him to me over a period of time so that he could retire and I could kind of take on restaurants in a way that was going to be not only financially viable for the organization, but also in a way that's going to allow me to be successful longer term, right? Because that's the goal, be an operator for 30 plus years. And so once we did that succession planning, everything now at this point in my career and my growth as an operator is about executing the plan, right? Every day looking at my P&Ls, making sure we're cutting costs, we're growing sales so that I'll be in a position to buy that next restaurant, right? So we're towards the tail end of that whole thing, but yeah, that's kind of how that works. You sit down, you do your succession plan, and then you just kind of execute that plan. But you got to make sure in between that you're still doing all the things operationally, because as a franchisee, McDonald's has a lot of say on whether I can or cannot get restaurants, right? So there's a number of visits and things that they do, from food safety to customer experience, to make sure that we're meeting what they call the national franchising standards. Those are the things by which you stay viable. If you're not meeting some of those standards, you're not eligible for what they call growth and or rewrite. So growth is your ability to buy more restaurants. Rewrite is you get a 20-year lease when I buy my restaurant. So as I buy each restaurant from my father, I get a 20-year lease on that restaurant. As long as things are good, that 20-year lease is good, but that 20-year lease continues to go. But if for some reason I wasn't financially sound, operationally sound, at the end of that 20-year lease, McDonald's can say, Mr. Melvin, it's been great, but we're not going to renew your lease, which means, you lose your restaurant, you're out of the system. So very important to always keep your eye on operations. But that's kind of how we matriculate the restaurants.
No, you explained it perfectly. Let's talk about the rise of technology. So, I visited one recently and I saw that, there's a line in the drive-through, the mobile orders, which is part of the technology, is filled up. You go inside and they got the kiosks. So you have all these different ways. Talk a little bit about that, as well as the app, as well as the third-party apps like DoorDash, Uber Eats. Yep. How has that changed the landscape of McDonald's?
That's a good question. I appreciate you asking that, because I think I'm going to start with the kiosk, which you alluded to.
Okay.
Because that's a technology that I feel like a lot of people felt like we were trying to eliminate jobs, right? People, when we first came out with kiosks, people were like, oh, you're trying to eliminate jobs. What we're trying to do is 2 things with the kiosk. For number 1, is allow customers to order in a way that fits them, right? And now when I say that, I think of this young generation that grew up with mobile phones, that grew up with texting, right? Not calling. That allows the young kids, that's how the young kids want to order, quite frankly. Yeah. They walk into a restaurant, they go to the kiosk, So that's why the kiosks are there. Not to eliminate jobs, but to allow people to order how they want to order, right? And I feel like we were slow about that. You look at Starbucks with their apps, and as you talked about the mobile app, I think we were slow to that market, honestly. But I think that we're in it now, we're in it to win it. But the delivery partners, the mobile app has been a huge game changer for the business, because it allows people to utilize this in a way that doesn't require them sometimes to leave home, right? And so those, for us, are incremental sales without us doing very little to anything at all.
Right.
So it's great. Yeah. It's great, right? People can be at home, order. That's another sale for me without them having to come into the restaurant. But then when you think about technology going into the future, there are things that we're testing now, automated order taking, right? Why would we do automated order taking, people ask? Well, because as the world we live in today, as the average wage goes up, we have some operators that are operating with an average wage of $20 an hour, right? So if you think about how that would affect the menu board, a Big Mac meal might be $18, $19. Nobody wants to pay $18, $19 for a Big Mac meal. So what automated order taking allows us to do is take those people who would be standing in front of a computer taking orders to do other things in the restaurant to improve productivity, to get guests through in a faster clip. And so I think that's some of the technology that's coming down the road to help free up man hours or increase people's productivity, let me say it that way.
Correct.
So but I mean, look, before COVID, I wasn't a believer in DoorDash. I wasn't. So I was like, this is ridiculous. Who wants DoorDash McDonald's, right? I didn't see it.
Yeah, until COVID.
But when COVID hit, and guess what? Everybody's stuck in their home.
Ding.
Yep. All of a sudden, the light went off. Oh, what? They can't be on the road, but guess what? They can still enjoy their favorite McDonald's menu item by ordering on DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, and have it delivered to their home. And I tell you, ever since COVID, that part of the business has been growing. I mean, double digits every year. I mean, it's phenomenal.
The way that I look at it as a business person myself is I think also what you get is that with people's intentionality, like me, I like to order before I show up to save time. But what that does for you guys is it engages brand loyalty, because now I have the app in order to get this special treatment, and so it kind of brings people in closer for that extra benefit that we both, it's kind of like mutual.
Exactly. And it's also a different experience for the guest, right? For that mom, you know, for like yourself, like you say, hey, you know what, I'm leaving the office, let me go ahead and order. I get there, order's ready, pull up to the spot, check in, boom, my order comes out in 3 minutes, right? Or the busy mom who's got 4 kids in the back, doesn't want to get out of the car, place that order, right? Don't have to be in drive-thru. Everyone's yelling, be quiet, what do you... Pull up, same idea, order's ready. You know what I mean? So it allows people, I think it allows some freedom in that perspective too. And then the app, like you said, which I'm so happy we're there, it allows us to do what Domino's has been doing, Starbucks has been doing, tailor offers to the guest based on how they utilize us, right? So it's not just like, oh, a medium fry. Maybe I don't like fries, right? Maybe I'm a sausage McGriddle type of guy, right? And so seeing what you purchase, now we can tailor those offers to individuals.
Yeah, that's why I got that $2 breakfast sandwich every morning.
Right. Oh, man. But yeah, it is great for that piece, and it does create that brand loyalty, right?
Right.
Because, you know, I think we are the best QSR out there. So we just want to make sure that people can utilize us and visit us in any way that they see fit, right?
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about brand collaboration. Me as a young father and as a consumer of content and brands myself, I always love when I see big brands like get hip to like pop culture. So like, for instance, Fortnite. The reason why Fortnite has been so successful for so long is they're constantly doing brand collabs.
Yeah.
One thing that I've seen you guys do very well, I think you guys have done it, I mean, ever since I was little, you guys would do it with athletes and different stuff like that. But I mean, what you guys do with like the Travis Scott collab, the Grinch meal, the even social media trends like the Grimace shake. That stuff, I mean, my kids are talking about that stuff.
Yes. How
important is that, you know, being relevant?
No, it's hugely important. I mean, because, you know, I think we could easily become a legacy brand that's lost touch, right? So I think McDonald's became very intentional 3 to 4 years ago about exactly that. And some of this stuff is organic, right? The Grimace shake, that was an organic thing. It kind of blew up on TikTok. And then McDonald's said, oh, how can we kind of capitalize on that with the Grimace shake, right? So sometimes it happens organically. And with these social media apps, TikTok and Instagram, or you know, Snapchat, the one my kid, sometimes these things just kind of somehow get a following of their own, like this momentum on their own, right? But then the other part is we realize that this is, if we're going to stay successful as a brand, we've got to find a way to connect with the young consumer, right? And so what's hot with the young consumer? Travis Scott, it was so funny. When Travis Scott meal happened in McDonald's, we were sitting in some McDonald's meetings, people were like, who is Travis Scott? Who is, like, anybody know who he is? Like, we were looking around the room like, I've never heard of this guy. What makes you think this is going to be successful? And a few people were like, well, I think he's married to one of the Kardashians or whatever. Mm-hmm. But when that thing hit the restaurants, Marshall, the way that meal was moving, it didn't matter who Travis Scott was to have the operator. They're like, oh, this was great for the restaurant.
Correct.
But then we realized, like, oh, we as older owner-operators, right, we're not hip to what the younger generation likes, right?
Correct.
So we have to listen to our marketing folks about what they're talking about, because they're connected at a ground level with this stuff that the younger generation's into that we have no idea about. Sweetie, they're like, who's Sweetie?
Right.
Who's that?
Right.
You know, Cardi B, Offset, like what is going? But when it hits the restaurants and the customer response to these things, I mean, it's been phenomenal. It's one of the things I feel like that McDonald's has really gotten right in the last several years. Because when they do a collab now, whether it be Travis Scott, Grinch, as you alluded to, I mean, they hit.
Yeah.
They hit, and they hit hard. I mean, Grinch was supposed to run for 3 weeks. Within a week, we were out of socks, out of the salt, out of everything. It just went here again. How do you predict that something's going to go that viral? It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, but I think it's going to be a bigger part of the business as we move forward. And I think it's going to be one of the best parts of the business, because I think it continues to bring the brand McDonald's into the awareness of the younger generation. Yeah. Right. Who may not necessarily choose McDonald's right away, right? Because there's so many QSRs out there now, right? Yeah. So how do we stay at the forefront of someone's mind, right? And I think those collaborations are a huge part of that.
Yeah. Okay. So to wrap up, so you know how every Happy Meal comes with like a toy? What would be something that you can leave with the audience that they could, take home and apply to their life, whether it's a book, an app, a mantra? What would you like to leave the audience with and exit today?
Well, that's a good question. I would say stay curious.
Love that.
Stay curious. I think that's probably one of the most important things I could say. Stay curious, question things, right? Don't take anything at face value. So I think those two things are very powerful, right? If you're curious, you're always asking questions. Yes. You're always researching. You're always looking for the deeper meaning or looking for the deeper connection. So yeah, that's something I would say.
I love that. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.